The massive crystal room of the Galactic Council became quiet as Ambassador Hyun-woo walked forward. His face showed no feelings as he looked at the representatives of 47 different alien species. Behind him stood Captain Sojin in her clean military uniform. The air felt heavy with tension. The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council. Hyun-woo said loudly so everyone could hear. Starting right now, all human colonies, trade routes, and military bases will no longer follow council rules. The Vorthek Prime Minister was a tall bug-like creature who made clicking sounds with his mouth parts that meant he was laughing. You cannot live without us mammals, your technology, your resources, everything you need comes from Council support. Sojin moved forward with her hand resting on her weapon. We survived ice ages, diseases, and world wars long before we met any of you. We will be just fine. The Aquarian representative had gills that moved nervously as she leaned forward. In her water-filled tank, the humans give us 60% of our military defense. Without their warriors, the Void Hunters will. That is no longer something we care about, Hyun-woo said, cutting her off. For 50 years we have bled and died defending worlds that vote against us. Every single time we have shared our technology, our medicine, our ways of making food. In return, you have called us savages, warmongers, and primitives. The Ethereal Council leader was a being made of pure energy trapped inside a clear shell that glowed with anger. Your species is too emotional, too unpredictable. These restrictions were needed for galactic stability. Captain Sojin laughed, but it was cold and sharp. Stability? You mean control. You have tried to limit how many children we can have, restrict where we can expand, and now you want to control our genetic modifications. You have forgotten one simple truth about humans, which is the Vorthek Prime Minister demanded we do not ask for permission. Young diplomat Min-ho was barely 30 years old, but already showed the toughness that all human negotiators had. He turned on a holographic display. These are the withdrawal papers. All human assets, including the fortress worlds guarding the outer rim, will be evacuated within 72 hours. The chamber exploded with panic. Representatives began shouting in dozens of languages, and their translation machines could not keep up with all the chaos. The crystalline collective speaker made harmonic sounds of distress. The Void Hunters have been testing our defenses for months without human military support. You will have to find another solution, Hyun-woo said as he gathered his documents. Perhaps your advanced civilizations can develop something more sophisticated than sending humans to die in your wars. As the human delegation got ready to leave, the Aquarian representative spoke above all the noise. Wait, we can negotiate. Find a compromise. Commander Tae-young had been quiet during the whole meeting, but now he finally spoke. His voice carried the authority of someone who had fought in the border wars and lived to tell about it. For 50 years we have been your sword and shield. We have died for worlds we will never see, for species that think we are barely above animals. We have had enough. The Ethereal Council leader flickered desperately. You are condemning the entire galaxy to chaos. The Void Hunters will consume everything. Then maybe you should have thought about that before treating is us like attack dogs. Sojin replied, we offered partnership, you demanded servitude. The choice was yours. The human delegation walked toward the exit, and their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. The weight of their decision settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The Galactic Council had been built on the assumption that humanity would always be there, always ready to fight, always willing to sacrifice for the greater good. They had been wrong. The massive doors closed behind the humans with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire galaxy. In the chamber, 47 species sat in stunned silence, finally understanding how big their mistake was. They had pushed humanity too far, taken their protection for granted, and now faced the consequences of their arrogance behind the closed doors. Hyun-woo stopped and looked back at the chamber one last time through the security monitors. Sojin stood beside him, watching the aliens argue and panic. They still do not understand, Sojin said quietly. They think this is just politics. No, Hyun-woo replied. They think we are bluffing. They believe we will come back when the first worlds start falling. Will we? Min-ho Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment, watching the chaos inside the chamber. The Ethereal Council leader was flickering rapidly, trying to restore order. The Vorthek Prime Minister was clicking his mandibles in what Hyun-woo now recognized as fear. The Aquarian representative was making desperate gestures with her webbed hands. No, he said finally, we warned them about the Void Hunters 50 years ago. We told them what was coming. We offered to build a proper defense, but they were more afraid of us than of creatures that eat entire civilizations. The three humans walked down the long corridor toward their ship. Their footsteps echoed in the empty halls that had once been filled with the sounds of galactic cooperation. Now there was only silence and the distant sound of arguing from the chamber. They had left behind. Commander Tae-young activated his communication device. Admiral Sung-ho, this is Tae-young. The withdrawal is complete. We are returning to Terra. Understood? Commander, came the reply. How did they take it about as well as expected? Tae-young said they are panicking, but they still think they can control us. Let them think that for now. The Admiral replied. It will make the evacuation easier. As their ship lifted off from the council world, Hyun-woo looked down at the planet below. It had been the center of galactic civilization for thousands of years, the place where 47 different species had come together to build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. It had been beautiful once. Now it would be the first to fall. When the Void Hunters came, the Council had spent 50 years trying to control the one species that could protect them. They had passed laws to limit human expansion. They had restricted human military growth. They had even tried to control human population growth, all because they feared what humanity might become. They had never stopped to consider what the galaxy would become without humanity to protect it. So Jin looked at the star charts on their navigation display. The Void Hunters are 3 months away from the outer colonies, maybe less if they move faster than expected. Then we had better hurry, Hyun-woo said. The evacuation of the fortress worlds will take time and we cannot leave any human technology behind. What about the refugees? Minho asked. The alien civilians who want to come with us, we take them. Hyun-woo said without hesitation. We are not monsters. We do not abandon innocent people because their leaders are fools, but no government officials who voted for the restrictions. Sojin added. Agreed. Hyun-woo nodded. They made their choice. Now they can live with the consequences. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the council world behind. In the chamber they had abandoned 47 species continued to argue about what to do next. None of them truly understood what was coming. The Void Hunters were not an army that could be negotiated with. They were not a species that could be reasoned with. They were a force of nature that consumed everything in their path, and the only species that had ever successfully fought them was walking away. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between protection and oppression. The lesson would cost them everything. 3 weeks had passed since the human withdrawal, and the first cracks in galactic civilization were already showing. In the emergency session of the Council, panic had replaced the usual diplomatic posturing. Fleet Admiral Kang-ho stood before the massive view-screen in the Terran Command Center, watching the evacuation of humanity's last military outpost in Council space. Behind him, Intelligence Officer Yoon-ji compiled reports from across the galaxy. The peripheral colonies are already under attack, she reported, her voice steady despite the grim news. The Void Hunters hit the Centauri mining worlds yesterday. The local defense forces lasted exactly 43 minutes. The Admiral's expression remained impassive. He had served in the border wars, had seen what the Void Hunters could do when they weren't held back by human battle lines. Casualties? Complete. Planetary sterilization. 3 billion beings turned to ash. Eun-ji paused, consulting her datapad. The Council is requesting immediate military intervention. Denied, Kang-ho replied without hesitation. We're no longer Council members. Their wars are not our wars. Across the galaxy, the Vorthak Prime Minister paced frantically in his hive chamber, his mandibles clicking in distress. His military advisor, a scarred veteran of the border wars, delivered the latest reports with growing desperation. The Void Hunters have broken through the outer rim defenses at 7 different points. The advisor reported. Our forces are retreating on all fronts. Without human tactical support and their berserker units, we cannot hold the line. The Prime Minister's compound eyes fixed on the strategic display. Red markers indicated Void Hunter incursions spreading like a cancer through previously secure space. How long until they reach the core worlds? At current rates of advance, perhaps 6 months, maybe less if they deploy their harvester fleets? The Aquarian homeworld had already begun emergency preparations. President Soo-young, one of the few humans who had chosen to remain in council space as a private citizen, watched the aquatic beings frantically constructing underwater bunkers. "They're scared," she observed to her Aquarian friend Deep Current. "I've never seen your people like this." Deep Current's gills fluttered with anxiety. The Void Hunters do not simply conquer, they consume. They turn entire worlds into feeding grounds for their spawn. Your people ... they were the only ones who could stand against them? My people were called warmongers and savages, Su Young replied bitterly. The council voted to restrict our military expansion just last year. They said human aggression was the greatest threat to galactic peace. We were fools, Deep Current admitted. We mistook your strength for brutality, your protection for oppression. Now we face the consequences of our prejudice. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Bisan, Governor Jinho received daily reports from across the galaxy. The images were horrifying, worlds stripped of all life, their populations consumed by the Void Hunters' biomechanical MONSTIES. His aide, Colonel Nari, entered his office with the latest intelligence reports. The Crystalline Collective is requesting asylum for their refugee populations. They're offering to trade their quantum computing technology for safe passage to human space. Jinho considered the request carefully. The Crystalline Collective had been among the most vocal critics of human expansion, claiming that humanity's rapid colonization threatened galactic stability. What's the recommendation from Earth? President Dong Haiyan's office says it's up to individual colony governors. We're no longer bound by council humanitarian protocols. But we're still bound by our own humanity, Jinho replied. Prepare refugee camps in the southern continent. We'll take their civilians, but no government officials who voted for the restrictions. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had tried to limit human expansion now begged for refuge in human space. Their advanced civilizations, their sophisticated technologies, their millennia of accumulated wisdom, none of it mattered when faced with an existential threat back in the council chambers. The ethereal council leader's form flickered with desperation as he addressed the assembly. We must swallow our pride and negotiate with the humans. Offer them anything they want: territorial concessions, technological exchanges, even seats. On the inner council, the Vorthic Prime Minister's mandibles clicked in bitter laughter. They don't want our technology or our titles. They want to be left alone to live as they choose. We wouldn't allow that. Then we'll change the laws. It's too late, the Aquarian representative interrupted. The humans have already begun sealing their borders. My intelligence sources report that they're implementing something called Protocol 7. The chamber fell silent. None of them knew what Protocol 7 entailed, but the fact that humanity had contingency plans they'd never shared spoke volumes about how little the council truly understood their former protectors. The Void Hunters continued their advance. And for the first time in galactic history, there were no human battle cries echoing across the void, no human ships charging into impossible odds, no human soldiers standing between civilization and annihilation. The galaxy was learning the difference between having humans fight for them and having humans fight against them. The lesson was proving more expensive than anyone had imagined. The evacuation of Fortress World Omega-7 was unlike anything in galactic history. Admiral Sunho stood on the command deck of the battleship Soul's Pride, watching as the last human transport ships departed the massive orbital stations that had protected the galaxy's eastern spiral arm for 3 decades. All civilian personnel have been evacuated, reported Commander Zijin, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were abandoning. The automated defense systems are powering down according to protocol, Sunho nodded grimly. Omega-7 had been humanity's greatest military achievement, a fortress world with weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems. It had never fallen, never even been seriously threatened. Now they were abandoning it to the void. What about the weapons stockpiles? He asked. Secured or destroyed, sir. The Void Hunters won't be getting their hands on human technology. Behind them, the massive fortress began powering down. Gun emplacements that had held the line for decades went dark one by one. The sight was both beautiful and heartbreaking, like watching a star die on the Council homeworld of Nexus Prime. Emergency sessions continued around the clock. The ethereal Council leader's form pulsed with barely contained panic as he reviewed the latest casualty reports. 17 worlds have fallen in the past week, he announced to the assembled representatives. The Void Hunters are advancing faster than our models predicted. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within 3 months. The Vorthic Prime Minister's mandibles clicked in agitation. Our combined fleets are no match for them. We need human tactical doctrine, human berserker units, human leadership. The humans won't even respond to our communications, the Aquarian representative reported. They've sealed their borders and activated something called the Isolation Protocol. Our ships are being turned away at the boundary. Young diplomat Hay-1, who had remained in Council space as an observer, finally spoke from the gallery. You want to know what the Isolation Protocol is? It's what happens when you push humanity too far. They're not just leaving, they're ensuring that whatever happens next, it won't be their problem. The Crystalline Collective's harmonic speaker resonated with desperation. Surely they won't let entire civilizations die over political disputes? Hay-1's laugh was bitter. Political disputes? You tried to control our population growth, restrict our expansion, and regulate our genetic modifications. You called us savages while demanding we die in your wars. What did you think would happen? Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Seoul, Dr. Mikyung worked frantically to accommodate the flood of refugees from fallen worlds. The hospital ships arriving daily brought survivors of Void Hunter attacks beings who had witnessed the complete destruction of their homeworlds. The trauma is unlike anything we've seen, she reported to Governor Wu Jin during their daily briefing. These beings have watched their entire civilizations consumed. The psychological damage may be permanent. Are we equipped to handle them? The governor asked. We're trying, but the cultural barriers are significant. Most of these species have never interacted with humans on an individual level. They're struggling to understand why we're helping them after their governments expelled us. The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep Current, the Aquarian refugee who had become something of a spokesman for the displaced populations, addressed the Human Colonial Council directly. We understand now, she said, her gills fluttering with emotion. Your species doesn't abandon the innocent, even when their leaders are fools. This is why you were the galaxy's protectors, not because you're the strongest, but because you're the most moral. The compliment stung more than any insult. Humanity had never wanted to be the galaxy's moral guardians. They had simply been the only ones willing to fight. Back in the Void Hunters continued their relentless advance. Without human battle lines to slow them, they moved with terrifying efficiency. Their biomechanical ships consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory, Commander Tejo, monitoring the situation from the intelligence station on New Earth, watched the strategic display with professional detachment. Red markers indicated Void Hunter positions advancing steadily toward the core worlds. They're not even trying to be strategic, he observed to his aide, Captain Sora. They're just consuming everything in their path? Why would they need strategy? There's nothing to stop them now. The Council forces are a joke without human support. They've been relying on us for so long they've forgotten how to fight. The truth of that statement became clear as reports filtered in from the latest engagements. Council forces, fighting without human tactical support, were suffering catastrophic casualties. Their advanced technology meant nothing when they lacked the will to use it effectively. The Vorthic, despite their fearsome appearance, were primarily defensive fighters. The Aquarians excelled at underwater combat but struggled in void battles. Their crystalline collective ships were beautiful but fragile. The ethereals were powerful but few in number. Only humanity had possessed the perfect combination of technology, tactics, and raw determination necessary to stand against the Void Hunters. And now they were gone. The galaxy was learning that protection and oppression were not the same thing, but the lesson was coming too late. The Void Hunters didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, and didn't show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, their ancient hunger stirred with anticipation. The galaxy's protectors had abandoned their posts, and the feast was about to begin. The once proud chambers of the Galactic Council now resembled a refugee camp. Representatives from dozens of species huddled in emergency sessions, their normal diplomatic protocols abandoned in favor of desperate survival planning. Ambassador Haiyan Wu received the first official communication from the Council 3 months after humanity's withdrawal. The message, delivered by a trembling Aquarian diplomat, was simple: "Please reconsider." He read it aloud to the Terran Federations. Emergency Council, his voice carrying no emotion. They're not asking for military aid. They're not offering concessions. They're begging us to reconsider our withdrawal from the Council. President Dong Haiyan, participating via hologram from Earth, shook his head slowly. Too little, too late. The Void Hunters have consumed 47 worlds since we left. Where was this humility when they were voting to restrict our expansion? Minister of Defense Chang Min pulled up the latest intelligence reports. The Council's combined fleets have been reduced by 70%. The Vorthak military is in full retreat. The Aquarians are fortifying their homeworld. The Crystalline Collective is preparing for evacuation. And the Ethereals? Haiyan Wu asked. They're attempting to negotiate with the Void Hunters. Apparently, they believe their energy-based existence makes them immune to consumption. The bitter irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The same species that had called humans primitive and savage were now trying to bargain with creatures that viewed all life as food on the embattled world of Kepler 442b. The last Council's stronghold in the Outer Rim, General Yun Su watched the evacuation with grim satisfaction. She had served as a military advisor to the Council for 15 years, trying to teach other species human tactical doctrine. The Vorthak are refusing to implement scorched earth tactics, she reported to the human evacuation fleet. They say it's against their cultural values to destroy their own worlds? Captain Yung Wu, commanding the rescue operation, shook his head in disbelief. They'd rather let the Void Hunters have intact worlds than deny them resources? Cultural sensitivity was always more important than military effectiveness to the Council, Yun Su replied. They're learning the cost of that philosophy now. The evacuation of Kepler 442b was humanity's last official action in Council space. As the transport ships filled with human civilians and their alien friends, the planet's automated defense systems were methodically destroyed to prevent them from falling into Void Hunter hands. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Incheon, Governor Kyung-soo faced an unprecedented situation. The Crystalline Collective's entire government had arrived unannounced, seeking asylum. They're not refugees, reported Security Chief Heo Jin. They're the actual leadership of their species? Prime Matrix, Submatrices, the entire hierarchy. They want to surrender their sovereignty to human protection. Kyung-soo studied the crystalline beings through the meeting room's reinforced windows. Their typically perfect formations were broken, their harmonic communications disrupted by what could only be described as panic. What are they offering in return? He asked. Everything. Complete technological exchange, territorial concessions, even voluntary submission to human governance. They're essentially asking to become a human protectorate. The governor considered the implications. The Crystalline Collective had been among the most vocal critics of human expansion, claiming that humanity's rapid colonization threatened galactic stability. Now they were offering to become human vassals. Set up a meeting, he decided. But make it clear that we're not interested in ruling other species. We just want to be left alone. The meeting was unlike any diplomatic encounter in galactic history. The Prime Matrix, a being of living crystal that had existed for over a millennium, prostrated itself before a human colonial governor barely 40 years old. We were wrong, the Prime Matrix admitted, its harmonic voice carrying overtones of genuine remorse. We thought your expansion was aggression. We didn't understand. That you were creating the infrastructure necessary to protect the galaxy. You thought we were building an empire, Kyung-Soo replied. We were building a fortress. We see that now. The Void Hunters consume everything they touch. Your fortress worlds, your military colonies, your rapid expansion, it was all to create buffer zones between the darkness and the light. The truth of that statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Humanity's aggressive expansion hadn't been about conquest. It had been about creating enough space to fight the inevitable war that was coming back on Earth. President Dong Hyen addressed the Terran Federation's emergency session. Representatives from every human world participated, their faces grim as they considered the reports from across the galaxy. The Council is in full collapse, he announced. 63 worlds have fallen to the Void Hunters. The remaining species are either evacuating to human space or preparing for last stands that won't last. Senator H.A. from the Mars colony raised her hand. What about the civilian populations, the refugees? We're accepting them according to our humanitarian protocols, the president replied. But we're screening out any government officials who voted for the restrictions on human expansion. That's going to be most of their leadership, observed Admiral Sung-ho via hologram. Then they'll have to find new leadership. Leaders who understand that protection and oppression are different things. The session was interrupted by an urgent communication from the council chambers. The ethereal council leaders' form appeared. On the main screen, flickering with desperation, President Dong Hyen, the being pleaded, the Void Hunters have broken through our final defensive line. They'll reach the core worlds within days. We're prepared to offer anything complete autonomy. For human space, territorial concessions, even dissolution of the council if necessary. The president's response was calm and final. You should have thought of that before you tried to control us. We offered partnership. You demanded servitude. Now deal with the consequences. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in silence. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. Indifferent to the fate of the civilizations that had once believed they could control the galaxy's most effective protectors, the Void Hunters were coming. And for the first time in galactic history, humanity wouldn't be there to stop them. The fall of Nexus Prime, the Council's homeworld, took exactly 18 hours. The planet that had been the center of galactic civilization for 3 millennia was reduced to a barren wasteland, its population of 12 billion consumed by the Void Hunters biomechanical monstros. Admiral Kong-ho watched the final transmissions from the safety of the human monitoring station at New Bizan. The last message from the ethereal council leader was a simple, desperate plea. We were wrong. Save yourselves. The orbital defenses lasted 6 hours, reported Intelligence Officer Yunji, her voice carefully neutral. The planetary shields held for another 4, the population centers. They were overrun in minutes? Casualties? The Admiral asked, though he already knew the answer. Total, the Void Hunters don't take prisoners. They don't enslave, they consume everything and move on. Across human space, the news was received with grim satisfaction mixed with genuine sorrow. The Council had been arrogant and foolish, but 12 billion beings had paid the price for their leaders' mistakes. On the refugee world of New Jeju, Dr. Mikyung worked frantically to treat the survivors of the Nexus Prime attack. The few beings who had escaped in the final moments brought horrifying accounts of the Void Hunters' feeding frenzy. They're not just monsters, whispered Deep Current, the Aquarian refugee who had become one of the camp's unofficial leaders. They're intelligent. They knew exactly how to break our defenses, how to target our weaknesses. How many made it out? Dr. Mikyung asked. Perhaps 1,000 scattered across a dozen escape pods. 12 billion reduced to 1,000 refugees. Deep Current's gills fluttered with grief. Your species tried to warn us about the Void Hunters. We thought you were being paranoid. The truth was more complex than paranoia. Humanity had encountered the Void Hunters during their early expansion, had fought them on the edges of known space long before joining the Council. They understood that the creatures weren't just raiders, they were a plague that consumed everything in their path. Meanwhile, On the human fortress world of New Jiangzhou, Governor Taeyang prepared for the inevitable. The Void Hunters had broken through the Council's final defensive lines and were advancing toward human space. It was time to implement the protocols that had been prepared for this exact scenario. All refugee camps are to be evacuated to the inner colonies, he ordered his staff. Military personnel are to report to their assigned positions. We're implementing Protocol 7. Colonel Nari, who had been helping coordinate refugee relief efforts, looked up from her reports. The aliens are asking what Protocol 7 means. They're worried we're planning to abandon them. Tell them the truth, Taeyang replied. Protocol 7 is what happens when you threaten human civilians. We're not abandoning them, we're protecting them. The implementation of Protocol 7 was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human military bases that had been disguised as civilian installations suddenly revealed their true nature. Asteroid mining operations deployed massive kinetic weapons. Seemingly peaceful agricultural worlds activated. Planetary defense grids that put the Council's military installations to shame. Captain Sojin, now commanding the defense fleet at New Seoul, watched the strategic display with professional appreciation. The Void Hunters are moving in their standard formation. They expect minimal resistance. They're about to learn the difference between fighting with humans and fighting against them. Her aide, Commander Wu Jin, observed, the first contact came at the edge of the New Seoul system. A Void Hunter scouting force of 50 biomechanical ships encountered what appeared to be a routine patrol of human vessels. The engagement lasted exactly 7 minutes. All enemy vessels destroyed, reported the patrol leader. No human casualties. The Void Hunters' biomechanical technology is impressive, but it's not adaptive. They're fighting the same way they did against the Council. And we're not the Council, Sojin replied. The truth of that statement became clear as the Void Hunters' main force entered human space. They encountered not the desperate, disorganized resistance they had faced from Council forces, but a coordinated defense that had been planned for decades. Human battle doctrine was simple. Hit hard, hit fast, and never give the enemy time to adapt. The Void Hunters had grown accustomed to overwhelming their opponents through sheer numbers and biomechanical regeneration. They had never faced an enemy that could match their aggression while surpassing their technology. The Battle of New Seoul lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Void Hunter fleet had been completely destroyed. Their biomechanical components scattered across the system to prevent regeneration. Human casualties were minimal, exactly as planned, on the monitoring station at New Bizen. Admiral Kang Ho reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. The Void Hunters are adapting their tactics. They're sending larger fleets, more diverse biomechanical configurations. Will it matter? Asked Intelligence Officer Yunji. No, they're still fighting the same war they fought against the Council. They don't understand that humanity has been preparing for this specific conflict for 50 years. The truth was that humanity had never stopped fighting the Void Hunters. While the Council had believed that diplomatic solutions could be found, for every conflict, humans had quietly prepared for the war they knew was coming. Every fortress world, every military colony, every seemingly aggressive expansion had been part of a grand strategy to contain the Void Hunters. The galaxy had called them paranoid, militaristic, and savage. They had been right. As the Void Hunters continued their advance into human space, they encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy that understood them completely. Humanity had studied their tactics, analyzed their biology, and prepared countermeasures for every possible scenario. The harvest that the Void Hunters had planned for the galaxy was becoming their own extinction. But they were learning this lesson too late, as their biomechanical fleets were systematically destroyed by an enemy that had been waiting 50 years for this exact moment. The galaxy's former protectors were about to remind everyone why they had been called the most dangerous species in known space. The final battle for human space began at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where the remaining Void Hunter fleets made their desperate last stand. What had started as a harvest had become a systematic extermination not of humanity, but of the Void Hunters themselves. Fleet Admiral Sung Ho stood on the command deck of the battleship Inchin's Fury, watching as the last of the biomechanical monstrosities was reduced to molecular debris. Behind him, the tactical display showed the complete annihilation of the Void Hunter Armada. "All hostile contacts eliminated," reported Captain Lejin. "The Void Hunter threat has been permanently neutralized." "Confirmed kills on all biomechanical vessels," added the weapons officer. "We're detecting no regeneration signatures." "The threat is contained," the Admiral nodded slowly. 50 years of preparation had led to this moment. The galaxy's most feared enemy, the creatures that had consumed entire civilizations, had been eliminated by the species the Council had called too aggressive and dangerously militaristic. Across human space, the news was received with quiet satisfaction rather than celebration. The war was over, but the cost had been measured in billions of lives across the galaxy. The Council's arrogance had nearly doomed every sentient species. In Gnome space, on the refugee world of New Jeju, Dr. Mi-kyung addressed the survivors of the galactic catastrophe. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the main assembly hall, their faces showing a mixture of gratitude and shame. "The Void Hunter threat has been eliminated," she announced. "You're safe now. You can begin planning for the future." Deep Current, speaking for the Aquarian refugees, asked the question that haunted every survivor: what happens now? Our homeworlds are gone? Our governments are destroyed? We have nothing left? "You have your lives," replied Governor Kyung-soo, who had joined the meeting. "And you have the opportunity to build something better than what came before." The reconstruction of galactic civilization began slowly. The surviving species, now numbering in the thousands rather than billions, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their cultures on human-protected worlds. The Crystalline Collective, reduced to a few hundred individuals, formally dissolved their government and requested integration into human society. Their prime matrix, the ancient being that had ruled their species for millennia, made a final harmonic declaration: "We were wrong about humanity. We thought your expansion was aggression. We didn't understand that you were building the infrastructure necessary to protect the galaxy from threats. We couldn't comprehend." Similar declarations came from the survivors of other species. The Vorthak remnants, barely 1,000 individuals, acknowledged that their fear of human militarism had blinded them to the necessity of that same militarism. The Ethereals, reduced to a handful of energy beings, admitted that their advanced philosophy had been useless against an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. President Donghayan, addressing the Terran Federation from Earth, outlined humanity's position going forward: "We will not rebuild the Council. We will not accept the role of galactic protectors. We will, however, honor our humanitarian obligations to the refugees and help them establish new communities on human worlds." The offer was more generous than the survivors had any right to expect. Humanity could have simply sealed its borders and let the refugees fend for themselves. Instead, they provided sanctuary, resources, and the opportunity to rebuild. But the terms were clear. There would be no return to the old system, no council to make decisions for the galaxy, no restrictions on human expansion, no attempts to control or limit humanity's development. The galaxy had learned, at a cost of billions of lives, that humanity's aggression had been the only thing standing between civilization and annihilation. Ambassador Hyun Woo, in his final report to the Federation, summarized the situation with characteristic bluntness: "The Council spent 50 years trying to control us because they feared our potential for violence. They never understood that our capacity for violence was the only thing protecting them from creatures that viewed all life as food." The new galactic order that emerged from the ashes was fundamentally different from what had come before. Instead of a centralized council making decisions for dozens of species, there were scattered communities of survivors rebuilding their cultures under human protection. Some species, like the Crystalline Collective, chose full integration with human society. Others, like the Aquarians, established semi-autonomous colonies that maintained their cultural identity while accepting human protection. The Vorthak, perhaps most surprisingly, requested permission to study human military doctrine. Their request was granted, and they began the long process of learning how to fight not for conquest, but for survival. As the years passed, the galaxy slowly healed. New worlds were colonized, new communities established, new cultures born from the fusion of human and alien perspectives. But the lesson of the Void Hunter War was never forgotten. Sometimes, the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are the ones standing between you and something even worse. The humans had walked away when they were pushed too far. The galaxy had learned at a cost that would be remembered for millennia that protection and oppression were not the same thing. And in the depths of space, where the Void Hunters had once lurked, there was only silence and the slow dance of distant stars, a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of mercy is the willingness to be called the villain by those you're trying to save. The galaxy was safe. Humanity had made sure of that. But the cost of that safety would be remembered forever as the price of arrogance and the value of understanding that some guardians cannot be controlled, only respected or lost.